Again for the Oxon Hill High School Choir. They were phenomenal. And again, I want to welcome all of you who are here today, those who are watching right now, and those who will watch this panel discussion as we kick off our back to school fair today. We have some wonderful people with us today, and I just want to introduce our panelists this morning. We are honored to have with us today Dr. Kevin Maxwell, the CEO of the Prince George's County Public School System. Let's give it up for Dr. Maxwell. We have with us today Dr. Cito Narcisse, the Assistant Superintendent. We also are honored to have with us Dr. Denise Green, Associate Superintendent as well. We have with us today Helen Coley, Associate Superintendent as well. Glad to have you with us this morning. We have several, we have other folks in the audience who are with us today. I want to acknowledge Dr. Joseph, who is the Deputy Superintendent for Teaching and Learning, who's with us today. I want to acknowledge Monica Golson, who is the Chief of Operations as well. It's good to see you. And all others from our Prince George's County Public School System who are with us today. Thank you so much for being here. Members of the school board who are with us today, we have Carolyn Boston, who is the Vice Chair of the Prince George's County School Board. Welcome. We also have with us today Curtis Valentine, member of the school board, who happens to be a member of our church, and also Sonia Williams, who's a member of the school board and also member of Mount Eden Baptist Church as well. I see teachers in the audience. I see administrators, principals who are in the audience today, and thank you for being with us. Parents, young people with us today. I want to get right into today's conversation. Cards are going to be distributed to those of you in the audience. If you have a question that you want to raise for members of the board, you can write that card down and it'll be received, and we'll share that. We only have a limited amount of time, so I'm certain we won't have an opportunity to get to all of the questions today. Are you ready to begin, panelists? All right. Dr. Maxwell, can you tell us about the new vision that you have set for your office for education that is centered on going from good to great, or great by choice?
Sure, be happy to. So we use Jim Collins' latest book, which is Great by Choice. There are a couple of key points I guess I'd make, understanding that we don't have time to go through the whole book, but he talks in his book about 10Xers is what he calls them. And those are organizations that outperform their peer group by 10 times. That's why they're called 10Xers. And so they have a whole group of researchers that look at business organizations and schools, and they try to look at those characteristics of an organization that help them, again, outperform like districts or like businesses. And he cites them, he talks about what they've done in those organizations to be better. And while I know those are businesses, most of what's in that book is about businesses, there's still similarities because it's an organizational structure, just like businesses have an organizational structure, we have an organizational structure. And trying to convince people and encourage people and let them know that we can do better, we can perform better than we're performing right now as a district. We have students, and you've seen some of them this morning, who clearly outperform their peer group, right? And what we want to make sure that we convey to our public and to our employees is that we can all do better too. Every single morning when you get up, you have a decision to make. And I don't know many people that put their feet over the edge of the bed in the morning and say, I think I'm going to be mediocre today. I think I want to be below average today. What we want everybody to do is when they walk in, know today is a new day, and you need to make a decision that you're going to do great things today, that you're going to choose to be great. And we want everyone in our organization to choose to be great. And we want to go from the sort of the bottom of the performance of the 24 districts in Maryland to the top. And the other thing he talks about is a 20-mile march. We know that we're not going to go from 23 to 1 in a year, right? But we are going to make progress, and that's what we want to have people focus on, is making progress.
Sure. Dr. Maxwell, speaking of progress, you established a transition team to conduct a review of the school system. The report that was released earlier, this year. Could you highlight some of the findings outlined in this transition team report?
So sure, you know, there are a number of things, and certainly, you know, one that underpins all of it is that we can do better. There's no question we can do better. But it talked about 4 or 5 different areas. It talked about making sure that we are strategically focused on the right goals, that we are implementing teaching and learning the way that it should be, that we are not over, I'm not sure, let's see how to say that right. The scope of some of the roles in this district were way too broad. There's no way that you could do what you were being asked to do. So making sure that you're aligning the work and the position so that you're not asking somebody to do something that no human being could possibly do. And so making sure that you have the right people, making sure that you're holding people accountable.
Sure.
All of those things are a piece of it. Finances, they had some very solid recommendations in finances, and I'll tell you right now, we're improving there dramatically. They had some suggestions, again, for teaching and learning and organizational structure, and so we've made some adjustments in our organizational chart, and we're almost done with that work now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maxwell. Could someone on the panel please describe for the audience what is secondary school reform and what will be the strategic implementation? What would that strategic implementation look like? That's for anyone on the panel to.
Yeah, so secondary school reform is a reform effort where it has 2 components. One is where we're pushing students to go farther in career academies in the high school level, as well as building capacity in what we call CT, career technical education. So what we're trying to do is make sure that students can kind of think through what kind of career path that they want to get to as they're going through their matriculation in actual schools. So, you know, if a student wants to go into business finance, or if they want to go into barbering or any of those other components, is trying to provide students with multiple options and kind of think through what their career paths are before they actually go through the process. So different schools have different sets of career paths. And in those schools, you'll have up to about 5 different type of academies that you can find, and that varies across the school district. And so what you'll hear students say they're going to go into law if they're in one school, or if there's options like environmental science, or it could be aeronautics at Duval. So each school will have different set of career paths that a student can actually take, and they'll take certain classes that guide them toward that curriculum. And so that's the basic gist of that.
What happens, Dr. Narcisse, or anyone on the panel, if a parent or a student desires to attend an SSR academy that's not offered in their zone?
So at this time, they are not part of our choice schools. These are, I would describe them maybe as a competition, sort of an oppositional competition to choice schools. So you can choose to apply to a magnet program and go to a different school, but you should have options within your own school that attract you to stay there and to encourage you to participate in what your school has to offer. We're not going to ever, in our district with the transportation infrastructure, it's not like we're a city like Baltimore or DC or New York that has such a robust subway system or bus system. Everything's oriented going to DC here. So getting from one place to the other, we'll never be a pure choice district. So what we're trying to do is put enough choices, enough options out there that we satisfy folks in the district.
And other panelists, if you want to chime in on any of these questions, certainly feel free to do that. You have
I would just add, those parents who are interested in what Pastor is saying and getting into these academies, have that information early as possible is important. And in middle school, for some of our career academy, particularly Oxon Hill High School, which is a science and tech high school, which they have a science and tech program, which you have to take an exam to get into. That exam is administered in December, and you take it sort of in the 8th grade in order to get into that high school in the 9th grade. If you don't take it in the 8th grade, you can take it again your freshman year, and then get into the 10th grade. If you do not get into those programs and maybe you don't pass the test, They also have a program for students, also it's in science and tech, but it's not a testing into program, and it still avails those resources that the school has to those other students. For example, I visited a school, they have a 3D printer. And when I was there, they were actually building a boat that they were going to put into the Potomac to measure the pH levels in the water, and there were some parts of the motor that he couldn't find. So he literally had to build these parts from scratch using a 3D printer. Students who test into the science and tech, we have a student here, a member of our church who's in that science and tech program. Stand up here. He's a member of that program. Give him a round of applause. So he's one of those brilliant students testing to the program, but students who may not have tested into it would still be given those opportunities for those same resources. But you have, I think, parents, 6th, 7th grade, I think it's a good opportunity for you all to avail your students the opportunities of saying, do I want to go into science and tech? Do I want to go into theater? Do I want to go into art? Do I want to go to IB? Do I want to be a carpenter? We have students who build homes. There's an entire cul-de-sac here in Clinton of homes that were built by the hands of Prince George's County students. They design the home. They frame the home. They do interior design in the home. So all these things are being done by students. A lot of those programs are being offered to students in high school, but I think as parents, you all should be understanding that these programs obviously fill up fast. They're very competitive, but the sooner you know about them, the better.
And
Well-
if I could add
oh,
just
yes,
one
sure.
other component, one final statement here, is that we recognize that while we are calling it secondary school reform, it is such that we have to begin preparing our students for this in kindergarten. So it all begins in kindergarten, and it is certainly through a K through 16 perspective, where it begins in kindergarten, and we're ultimately keeping in mind that we want all of our scholars to be prepared for college, and we certainly do not want it to be such that they're having to go and enter college, having to take the remediation courses.
Sure. Well,
other piece-
okay, yes, Doctor.
The other piece I just want to add to it, not only in that fact that it's a K-16 initiative or mindset, it is also one that has built-in supports around professional development for teachers as to how do we get our students ready and understand that teacher foundation and teacher development is so important, as well as parent and community support. So all of those factors are built into this initiative.
Sure. Well, I want to ask a question now about Common Core. There's been so much conversation and so many questions about Common Core. How would you describe the first year of its implementation? What were its successes? What were some of the challenges? And also, would you take a moment to perhaps dispel some of the misunderstandings about Common Core state standards? Common Core.
I'd be happy to. I'm a big fan of Common Core, for the record, just
Okay.
so everybody's really clear that I think it's a really good thing for our children. It's a very good thing for our country. It is rooted in sort of this national reform movement, but it's not, from, somebody who doesn't know anything about education. This came from conversations between governors and the National Governors Association and state school officers like our state superintendent, Dr. Lillian Lowry, and Nancy Grasmick before her. When we look at ourselves as a country, we see ourselves as this great and powerful, huge country. And we are great and powerful, but we're not so huge. When you look at the economy of China, for example, it's about to overtake the United States economy as the largest economy in the world. So this is a very real thing about being competitive internationally and giving our children the skills that they need to compete in a world that's evolving very, very rapidly. When you look at China and India, they have almost 2.5 billion people between those two countries, and we have 330 million, the last number I saw. We might be up a little bit more since then. So we've got to be really good, right? We can't afford to be mediocre as a country. We have to be great. Our kids have to be great. So it's rooted in that concern that we continue to be a competitive country. People used to talk about our curriculum in the United States as being a mile wide and an inch deep. And when you look at how other countries teach, they teach very deeply the concepts, the thinking processes, the critical thinking processes, and what we have been doing is writing standards that take our children more deeply so that they understand the math behind the math, if you will, that they understand the concepts behind the reading and literature. So the goal is to make our children more competitive. These standards are built in mind with like the international PISA assessments, which you can find out more about online. I won't speak to all that today, but it's to help our children be more competitive, and I think that it will. The implementation, this isn't really the first year. This work has been going on for several years. The national standards were developed, and then the states worked on their standards, and then the local school districts have been writing their curriculum to those standards. So let's be really clear when we talk about standards versus the curriculum. It is not a scripted kind of thing. You don't walk into a class and the teacher has to say this on this day or anything like that. There's still flexibility for teachers to look at the group of children in front of them and adjust their instruction, their strategies to meet the needs of those children. But the goal, again, is to make our children more competitive. And I think that while the standards from Common Core are more rigorous, we do think that in the long run they're going to help our children be better prepared. That said, the PARCC assessments, we piloted those last spring, and we'll give those completely to our students this year. But I want to just say to people, you can't compare the tests, the PARCC test and the assessments to MSA any more than you could MSA to MSPAP before that and functional tests before that. They're completely different tests. So if they're going to have to be given, they're going to have the cut scores set, what is proficient in reading on the new test, because proficient might have been 80% on one test, it might be 30 on this test. I don't really know where those cut scores are going to be, but I just want to caution everybody that just like when they reset the scores for the SAT and went from 1,600 to 2,400, and now they're going back again. You just can't compare those numbers, and you just have to be really careful with that, so that because our kids are really going to learn more. We just don't know where the cut scores are going to be.
Anyone else have any comments about Common Core, PARCC?
Implementing the Common Core, I was able to watch it as a parent, as a PTA president at Gwynn Park High School. So looking at it from a high school level, I was able to see how they implemented the Common Core. And two things really stuck out. One was trying to get our students to communicate better. And every class, from art to English, had a writing assignment. If you were in gym, you had to write something about physical education. And I thought that was very important for our students to have that opportunity to write in every single class. The other thing that sort of stood out was the cross-pollination of the classrooms. Cosmetology talked with the chemistry students, and they talked about the chemicals that they use. Math class, and they talked with their other math students, like the financial students. They talked about it with the automotive students, and culinary, and they talked about how math is involved in every single subject. So I thought that was great because the kids were able to learn from each other and see how these classes overlap. So seeing it implemented, I thought it was a great move forward for our students in Prince George's County.
Okay. Brother Valentine, anyone else?
I want to address some of the myths.
Yeah.
Myth number one, this is not a Democratic Party, President Obama overreach. As the CEO mentioned, they were adopted state by state. So all 50 or 48 governors adopted them outright and said, we want this. But as you see it being rolled back, and every day you may read about different states rolling it back, it's become, people say, a political football during the midterm elections, where people are saying President Obama is trying to reach. Well, no, you actually adopted it. This is not President Obama's issue. So I think that's one misconception about the Common Core. Second thing is that that the government is trying to prescribe what we teach or how we teach in classrooms. In its title, it tells you these are standards. They're not a curriculum. it gives every school district, all 15,000 in the U.S., the freedom to write your own curriculum to the standards. What it says is, as an American, this is what you should know when you go off to college or if you go off into the world to work. Myself and Pastor both went to Morehouse, so in Atlanta. We have students from 50 states. We got high school students here, you know, but for example, we come from 50 states. Pastor's from Virginia, I'm from New Jersey. He and I sit down in a history one-on-one class at Morehouse. In that classroom, you have students from 50 states with 50 different standards on what a student should learn about history. And to be a professor in college, to sit down and to say, on day one, we're going to start talking about the, the Revolutionary War, or just pick anything, and to say, well, what did you learn in Virginia, Mr. Coates? Well, in Virginia, we learned this. What did you learn in New Jersey, Mr. Valentine? Well, we learned this. And for someone like myself who's traveled to other countries and seen what other countries are doing, and almost every developed country in the world have standards for their entire country. Because they say to be Finnish, to be British, to be Chinese, to be Indian, to be from Singapore, we have to establish what it means to be. And it creates a sort of a national solidarity, because we all know who we are and we have a strength. But in the U.S., you're seeing through a lot of the news that we are becoming a very fragmented country and very divided in many ways, economically, but also educationally. But I think the Common Core standard is a way to create equity in what we're learning and increase the likelihood that all of us will go to college. And when we go to college, that we come with a level of understanding that will make sure that when we get to college, we also graduate. So the misconception about this is President Obama trying to overreach, or these are the federal government trying to reach into our curriculum, are just rumors, and unfortunately have taken control and have fueled people who want to roll back Common Core.
And if I could just one last piece, unless someone else has something to say, but the other thing was with No Child Left Behind, which was the one, the national piece before Common Core. Every state under No Child Left Behind was allowed to establish their own standards. And so some states, Maryland had pretty high standards, relatively high standards. Other states had very low standards. And so kids could get diplomas in some of those states and not learn as much as kids who were being denied a diploma in rigorous curricular states like Maryland. And so what Common Core does is it creates these consortia, if you will, of states that have adopted these Common Core standards, and they're all playing on the same field now. They're not in different places around the country, which, as Mr. Valentine, indicated, is really important for us to make sure everybody's in the same place.
Sure. Ms. Boston, I want to ask you, as Vice Chair of the board, what do you feel are the most pressing educational issues from the board's perspective, and what's the board's plan for addressing those priorities? And then if I could ask a follow-up question, we're getting a lot of questions in from the audience. What strategy exists to reach and to reclaim families who are seeing private school education as the alternative, as the main alternative for them for getting their children a good education? This is an issue that we constantly face. I faced it recently in my recent campaign. It's asked over and over again, and so I just wanted to ask, what do you feel the most pressing issues, and what can the board do, and what can the system do to reclaim and reach families who are perceiving private education as the way to go?
One of the things that I feel is pressing issue for our education, we definitely need to make sure that we're funded properly. I think that's key. We have and especially with our CIP projects, we have so many aging schools that we need to make sure.
I'm going to say there are so many acronyms in
Capital Improvement Plan.
I'm sorry.
Yes,
but that's important because we definitely got to make sure that our schools are properly operating so our kids can learn properly. One of the other big things that I feel is what we're doing here is the parental and community engagement piece, the partnership I think that develops that help our kids with the education piece. I do believe that we can't do this work without everybody being involved. I think it takes a village, like we always say, and it's important that we have that piece. One of the things that we've been doing, I believe, to try to bring parents back to our school system in this year, I think, is the implementation of some of our specialty schools, bringing in like Spanish Emergent, expanding those programs, our TAG programs, our art integration. I think these are some of the things that we've been hearing from parents that they want to see more of. And I think we've done a great job in making sure that we're providing that, those resources for parents to bring it back in.
Anyone else want to chime in on that?
And I'd like to add to that piece as well, is we certainly recognize, as Dr. Maxwell referenced just a few ago, is that it's all about results too. We recognize and understand that when numbers change, perceptions change. Therefore, we're actually working as a collaborative school system where we're working towards getting good results. That movement from where we are, as Dr. Maxwell referenced now, in being recognized as a system, to a different level in terms of rankings of school systems. So we're on point as a school system. And I think that this year, we certainly, and it began last year, where we were all apprised to where we're going to be moving as a system. We have professional development calendar. We have a professional development calendar this year, as we did on last year, where we were actually embracing Common Core and other aspects of making us a great school system by choice. Professional development at the school level, professional development principals participate in meetings monthly, systemically, where professional development practices that are linked towards improving instructional practice is at the forefront of each and every one of those meetings. We're structured as well so that we have the associate superintendents and the instructional directors that are actually going out into our schools and actually monitoring the instructional practices weekly. And it's all about branding. We're really working on practices of improving the branding of our school system overall. And we're not asking that we do it systemically. We're too asking that each school is structured in a way by which parents, community members as well, are being informed of what each school offers. Branding works. And we find often that many parents are not informed of all of the instructional practices and events and programs that exist within some of the schools. So we are certainly working on branding practices for our school system.
That's so true.
I just want to add to that. As a parent that actually made the transition from private to public school, the one thing, and she touched upon it, we don't know or didn't know what the schools had to offer. And as a parent of a boy who motor oil runs through his veins because he loves cars, there wasn't a private school that offered a program for him to get hands-on experience in automotive repair and understanding how automobiles work. And the only reason that I became aware of that is because I talked to my neighbor. And so as we improve how we are branding ourselves, and events like this help us to get the word out about the programs that we have to offer, so those parents that are in private school get to know what we have to offer. That gives them a better opportunity to see what options we have in public school. On top of sharing all the successes that we have and the amazing students that we have in Prince George's County, out of the kids that received the Gates Foundation Award for Maryland, Prince George's County students received 20% of that out of the whole state of Maryland. So sharing that information, it will help private school parents consider Prince George's County as an option.
Thank you. We need to do more of that partnership and collaboration, even with assisting with the CIP. I mean, there may be ways for churches and clergy and pastors to partner with the school board as you're attempting to make your case for getting the sufficient resources. We must do a better job of telling the story, because so much of the negative is told in the media and the news, and much of it, you know, it's not, you know, if you repeat a negative message over and over and again, it becomes gospel for many people. And there's so many good narratives and positive stories, and the resources are phenomenal. We need to do a better job of thinking through how we enhance our partnership between faith communities community organizations in the system as well. There's so many questions, that are coming in based on individual circumstances. And if I could just kind of give them to you, and you can kind of respond to them as we get to our remaining 20 minutes or so. Is the system planning to place social workers in schools? One parent asked, to perform tasks that are often being performed by teachers and counselors. So I guess there's a question about more social workers. There was also a question about there's increased interactions between students and law enforcement, sometimes negative encounters with students and law enforcement. And is anything being done to educate and enlighten young people about how to better engage the police or law enforcement? That was one of the questions being asked.
So,
Yes, it's on. Yes.
So I guess, first of all, particularly in our T&I areas, we do already have some social workers provided. T&I, I'm sorry, it's Transforming Neighborhoods Initiatives, one of the signature initiatives of our county executive, Mr. Baker, providing resources into some of our most challenged communities. And so there are some social workers in our most challenged schools right now assisting, with that work. They're not going to be replacing guidance counselors or anything. That's a different role there. We have some other partnerships as well with a number of organizations and institutions that work with us to provide different levels of support, from healthcare to counseling, and we're appreciative of that work. The last, what was the second piece?
Young people dealing with law enforcement.
So there's a huge national conversation that Maryland's a part of right now on behavior and suspensions that are discretionary as opposed to violence or drugs or weapons or things like that. They're resulting in a lot of great conversation, I think, that are going to result in less severe disciplinary action for children and better conduct. We've been doing a lot of work in this district and across the state over the last 10 years or so with something we call positive behavior intervention, teaching kids, as you said, how do you conduct yourself so that you're not here, but trying to work with children to make sure they understand what choices they should be making as opposed to the choices they may have already made or could make instead of. And so we've been putting in a big focus on positive behavior as opposed to focusing on negative behavior.
Dr. Green.
Just want to add to that also. Last year, a new position in Prince George's County, Dr. Angela Wakwea, who is our Director of Health and Innovations. And one thing that she has been doing is making sure that all schools have a nurse on board, and so that's been one of her more visible initiatives. But along with that is really raising the awareness of health and wellness and how that impacts students academically, impacts students behaviorally, and certainly has been after us, and how we are leading a healthy lifestyle and having conversations with schools, more conversations with schools around that aspect, because we know that when we focus on health and wellness, it impacts students academically, and it impacts students as also behaviorally. So,
great. I'm gonna get through some rapid fire questions here. I know all of you want to chime in on all of these issues, and I just want to throw them out. Oh, school overcrowding. What's being done, Dr. Maxwell, Dr. Narcisse, about school overcrowding and reducing the student-to-teacher ratio? And then another person asked about information technology. Are all schools equal when it comes to access to and use of IT for instruction? So these are kind of two quick questions.
On the first question,
yeah.
What are we doing about overcrowding in our schools? I'll go back to Ms. Boston's great point. But, we have over a $2 billion with a B $billion backlog in our school construction and maintenance budget. We're $2 billion behind. That's on last year's dollars. So we might be at 2.4 or 5, by this year. That's a lot of need to improve buildings. We can't just add rooms, right? We add portable classrooms. We do have a program in place. We're going around and replacing some of these pods, and we're putting additions on schools to get rid of the portable classrooms and bring people inside. But we do need to work on a long-term solution to this whole building, problem. Everywhere I go in this county, everybody wants a new school or wants their school replaced. It's very clear that in the northern part of this county, we need 2 middle schools yesterday, and we don't even have them in our budget to build new schools because that's how many seats behind we are, 2 whole schools. So it's a big issue, but I can't fix it without money. And so I'm just being honest. We have to figure out how we're going to do that. Mr. Baker and the county executives from Montgomery and Baltimore County went to the state legislature last year and asked them to fund the 3 big districts in Maryland differently than they have been funding them in the past, and each county indicated that if the state would increase their percentage to us, we'll increase our pot, and then we can get this done faster. And so I would say to everyone, when you see your delegates and your senators and those kind of people, tell them to help get us more money. Because Mr. Baker's already been to them. I've been to them. I sat before the House and Senate committees with Mr. Baker last year and with our board president and pleaded for more money. So that's one. IT, no, everybody's not even. Everybody is wireless now. We do have a formula to make sure that every single school has the number of devices that they need for the park assessment so that everybody will be tested. So those aren't a concern. But you have schools like Oxon Hill High School, who was just completed and has essentially a 1-to-1. You've got a few other schools that, because of the fortunate circumstances of a brand new building that equipment came with, they can afford to go to 1-to-1. You have a couple others that got grants, but everybody has what they need. But some schools really do exceed what they need.
So back on the overcrowding, so in constructing new schools doesn't mean that existing schools get phased out. So
no,
it doesn't.
No,
okay.
No. Oxon Hill didn't get phased out. We built a brand new school. We replaced that building. We have lots of examples of schools, where we've gone in Northwestern, for example, we built a brand new school on that property and then tore down the old one and put in the parking lots.
I guess I was wondering, how is that going to address the overcrowding?
Oh, bigger. Bigger, I'm sorry.
Bigger.
More classrooms. So when you build a brand new school, you can either go up another floor or you can go out another wing. It depends on, the property. It depends on the layout of the piece of property you have, whether you can go wider or whether you have to go higher. But when you construct new schools, you're in that or renovate schools. Sure. Once you get the funding, you can meet the needs for that school.
Let me add something. I think so. Dr. Maxwell also comes to the school board and has something called a school leveling, where you have staff who I think October, November, will say in certain classroom A there are projected to be 40 students. You come in and say, well, we have staff sort of off to the side who we will send into that school, and we're able to divide that class if necessary. But that gets back to a human resource question that I think we have not really addressed, in how we're recruiting and retaining our teachers. And it gets back to school discipline. I think the idea of you growing your own, and we getting former Prince George's County public school students to come back in to teach and be able to go in and see a student and say, little Johnny maybe having an issue, and say, well, I know where Johnny lives, I know his community, I know his mom, I know what church he goes to. I can be able to intervene quicker than someone who came from California or from New Jersey or somewhere else who is really trying to get to the community and is not sort of the community. So the idea of how we recruit and retain, I think one of the first things that we came in, when I was a board member, was the first thing we said was, what are we going to do about the Human Resources Department? And since then, we are literally reforming the entire department, because we want to be able to say, when we go out, and I've started a group called the Male Educator Network. We're really trying to increase the number of male educators. We only have about 20% of our educators are male, but half our students are. So you're going to schools, you got mostly young men who are trying to find themselves in a community where we have 70% of our homes are female-led. No men at home, not married men in school. Sure. How you deal with that for discipline issue is something that we have to address, but it's a grow your own strategy. It's getting human resources in, but that will address some of the overcrowding so that the CEO can come and say, now board, we're going to have to move some staff around the county because we have some classes that are under-enrolled, and then we have some that are overcrowded, and he has the authority and the freedom to move staff around the county in order to level those classes to make sure that overcrowding doesn't have to wait for school construction, which could be 5-10 years away.
I'm glad you addressed teacher retention. There were a few questions about teacher retention. Ms. Coley, could you, we have a question from a parent who says, my 8th grader has had an IEP since the 3rd grade. She has dreams of attending college, but she's on a 5th grade math level. Why hasn't she been brought up to grade level? Why are good grades being given to her? And what can be done now to get her back on track and back on level?
Yes, and thank you for that question. All students matter to us, and particularly those students.
And can you explain an IEP
Yes.
for those who don't know?
An individualized education plan. That's what the acronym IEP stands for. And what I would actually say to that parent is to continue to engage in conversation with the classroom teacher and with the school principal with regard to opportunities that are being provided for that particular student. We all often meet students where they are so that we can actually provide them those enriched, enhanced, engaged opportunities through intervention. And there are several interventions that should be afforded to and provided to your child with regard to where she is in mathematics. Now, when you talk about the grade, she may in fact receive a high grade, but she's not necessarily on grade level. But the high grade may be a result as well of where she is performing currently. So it's such that it is up to a school, and it is a responsibility of a school to continue to work with that. And certainly, just because you have an individualized education plan, it does not mean that you will not be college bound. It's just our responsibility to provide those opportunities for your children, so that they're continuing to be just as ready as their peers.
And I have to agree with what Ms. Coley said, because my granddaughter had an IEP starting in kindergarten, and she is actually in college today. So I do know that if you stay with the, you have to be there. You have to advocate for your child all the way. You have to do it every year.
Sure.
And that your children can be successful and actually go to college, even with an IEP.
And the one thing also I'm just going to add very quickly to that is, which also kind of goes along with questions in terms of parents, what do you do and being college ready and college minded, is begin to seek to learn about different colleges. And there are colleges, indeed, who provide support and accommodation for students with individualized educational programs. So start your education in learning about those colleges that continue that support structure. Because one of the things that we know, for a student to have an IEP, a student is working significantly below their grade level, at least 2 years below grade level. So there's going to take time to bring students up to a particular grade level, and they may not get up to the grade level that they're currently in, but it does not mean that they will one day be in college. And there are certainly many colleges who support and continue the accommodations with students who come in with IEPs.
Sure.
Just the last thing on college is College Ready. Under Ms. Boston and the board's leadership, we're having a college and career fair on the 27th of September, Saturday, September 27th, at Flowers High School at 8 or 9? 9 o'clock in the morning. And we'll have lots of colleges and universities represented there, and it's never too early to start going and asking questions. Absolutely. You know, do you have accommodations as a university for a student who has a disability, and what do those look like? What kinds of programs do you offer at your university? Is this a good school to go to if you want to be an engineer? Is this a good school to go to if you want to be a teacher? You know, great
what was that
opportunity.
Date again?
The 27th of September at Flowers High School at 9 o'clock.
Dr. Narcisse, can you say something about how the system deals with homeless children and children who may not have, who come to school with, they're hungry, they have food deficiencies? One person is asking, and Dr. Narcisse, can you also say something about, can more buses be allotted to help with after-school programs? One parent is asking as well.
All right, so the boss wants to do the food part. So in terms of homeless students, we work closely with Darrell Williams. Chief Williams is right over there, his office, who does a lot of support services around a lot of needs for homeless kids. We actually have a very robust system around that. We're providing a lot of different set of supports through the counseling in the offices at the high school level and at elementary and middle. And also what we try to do is make sure that we provide variation of services from whether it's through connecting with different sets of communities, community-based organizational programs to try to help provide supports internally and externally. I think one of the best comments you'll always hear is it takes a village to raise a student, so we try to coordinate a lot of things, not only internally but also externally. One of the best things around in terms of the leadership and the work that's happened in our system since Dr. Maxwell's came on with Mr. Baker is that we have a lot of coordinated services with the county exec's office, which kind of helps a lot tremendously on how we support schools from the Transforming Neighborhood initiatives to many different other programs. Usually in most systems, those organizations are they're separate. So you have your schools and you have your county exec's office and you know, we're communicating, but now everything is aligned. And so we get a lot of supports around working with homeless children and families. And we also provide a lot of different sets of supports ranging from, it doesn't matter where you are in the county, whether you're in the southern part of the county to the northern part of the county. We have also work with different sets of families and parents and from languages to many different things. So that's where we are in terms of that component.
Sure.
In terms of your other question was around transportation.
Transportation for after school, can more buses be allocated for after school?
Yeah, so I'm looking at our chief operating officer, Ms. Golson. So we work closely with Ms. Golson over there around how we work around providing transportation services. It is a funding issue, but we also try our best to try to give people students options. So whenever there's any issue, right, we try our best once they communicate with our office to provide that service. So what we don't want communities to think is that if they don't fit in a certain category, there's a need that they don't have, we don't try our best to work with you. We will help you find a solution, right? Whether that's, you know, the other day we talked about providing kids with services around going to summer school or providing services for a different set of programs. So whenever there's any of those challenges, when we get those type of special requests that come to any of the associates or in any of the offices, we try our best to try to accommodate. So even though that we have this huge gap a little bit around the funding piece, it doesn't mean we can't figure out and problem solve a way to provide that service to you. So I think the number one thing I hope that people really hear from us is, you know, we are one system, one village, one family around this work. So any service or needs that you have, you know, communicate with anyone, whether it's a board member, whether it's one of us at the school system, your principal. We always tell you that your principal is your first point of contact with your teachers and counselors and social services. And once we find out those pieces, we can be able to facilitate other areas.
Sure. Dr. Maxwell, you wanted to address
So the food issue, you know, while we have a lot of poverty in our school district, we're still one of the wealthiest states in the wealthiest country in the world. And I just feel really strongly that we have to do more in this area. We should not have hungry children come into school. We've been working in the last year, and I'm not sure the exact number, but I'm pretty sure we have one of the largest increases in breakfast in the classroom programs in the state, in Prince George's County Public Schools, making sure that we're trying to feed as many eligible children as possible. You can't possibly, if you're sitting in the first hour or so of school, whether you're in elementary or secondary school, concentrate on geometry or language arts if your stomach is growling and you haven't eaten this morning. And when we complained when last year's winter came and, you know, we got icy sidewalks and driveways to shovel, we had kids that didn't eat those days because they didn't come to school, right? And so we have an obligation as a society to deal with this issue of childhood hunger. We're doing everything we can as a school district right now, but we've got to do better as a society because we should not have hungry children in the United States of America.
Thank you so much. I want to try to get to these. I'm just going to read these last three questions as they're cutting us at this time. I'm new to Prince George's County school system and would like to transfer my child to a school outside of my boundary. Is this possible? Will I need to provide transportation? The other is consideration being given to fund College Summit to any senior who wants to take it? So someone can perhaps address that. Here's another acronym question. Can you explain the school instructional team and the SST process?
Well, those are some pretty big questions for two or three more minutes.
Two or three.
So I'm not sure
Yeah.
what, like College Summit. I mean, we have something called a Summit program at one of our high schools, but we also have the dual enrollment program at the community college that the system pays for in a memorandum with the community college. But if you want to ask that question when we break from here to almost anybody here, Dr. Joseph been off easy sitting over there this morning, or Daryl, but we could probably get a better answer on that one. There is a transfer policy. If you request a transfer, there are certain reasons to approve that transfer that aren't programmatic. Like if you get into a magnet program, then we would provide the transportation. But if for some other reason you want your child to attend a different school, typically we require you to provide that transportation. We can't afford to just provide transportation for 128,000 kids. I think we're going to crest this year wherever they want to go in the district. But there is a transfer process, but you do have to have a pretty legitimate reason. We want all of our schools to be able to provide the services that parents need in each of those schools. Sure. What was the last question? SST and SIT. So those teams come together to talk about the instructional needs of individual children within schools. I think the difference between those teams is simply that an SIT, a school instructional team, is school-based people, and the supplemental services team includes people from outside the school, like pupil personnel workers and others, psychologists and others. And typically, they deal with kids who have needs that aren't being met in the regular program and talk about how those needs can be met. They certainly deal with students who may need a different placement from the school if they have the individual education plan as a special needs student and things aren't working out in school. One of the functions of that school would be to identify or help to identify other programs that might be more appropriate.
I want to add one thing about the transfer process. I think when parents want to transfer their children to other schools, they think they're doing so because they think the school may have better test scores and a lot of indicators that people think they use to decide whether they want their children to go to certain schools. But I want to say something. Numbers lie. Numbers lie. When someone says that that school down the street has a better MSA score, a better HSA score, I'll say, what grade is your child going into? I'll say, did your child go to pre-K? I'll say, did you read to your children at night? Those scores have a lot of things in them. And when you're trying to make a decision about your child, you have to also think about what you're doing at home with your child and whether that's even going to affect your child. You may go to a school that may have a very high MSA score, but for students whose parents read to them at night, children who go to pre-K, they may be off the roof, but there could be an overrepresentation of students who don't have those things. So when you're thinking about sending your child to a certain school, first thing I do, I think you should visit. I think so many parents I've spoken to sending their kids to private schools had never even been to the school that they're zoned for because somebody told them they heard something that they wouldn't want to do, they didn't want to go because someone they heard didn't want to go. But what grade your child goes into, what you do at home has way more of an impact on how your child's going to do than whether the school has an MSA score of this or an HSA score of that. So you're making decisions about where you send your students. I think be informed. We're going to give you a lot of information. We're becoming more transparent. But it's also important that you become more adept at interpreting that data so that you make the best decision for your children.
Well, I want to give our panelists a round of applause. Can we do that? And I really want to thank each and every one of you for being here today. We have the leaders of our public school system right before us today, and for so many of you to come out this morning to share with us today. It's a tremendous statement. It says a lot about you and your investment in the system and in our young people and our parents and in our community. It says a lot about your commitment. And it is a huge signal to this faith community, to our young people and parents who are here today. And I just cannot thank you enough for being here today. And I look forward to ongoing collaboration and conversation together. Yes, Dr. Green.
Just want to finally, I want to thank you because for you to take time this morning to come and be here shows your commitment to education in your child. Because the number one thing in terms of question, how can I support my child, is knowledge. You gaining knowledge. So your attendance tonight, I applaud you.
Thank you.
Or this morning, I applaud you getting up early to be here. So thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll stream this. We'll send it to our members. We'll put it on our broadcast on News Channel 8.